I knew my neighborhood had problems, but I never thought it would come to this. One morning, I opened my garage to head to work. The sun barely up, coffee still warm in my travel mug, when I heard her voice. The HOA president. She stormed onto my driveway like she owned it, finger pointed at my car, screaming that I'd stolen it. Car I'd had for 5 years. The whole scene unfolded so fast it felt unreal. By the time the police arrived, neighbors were gathering like it was a circus, phones out, whispering, smirking, pretending they were concerned but clearly enjoying the drama. I remember thinking, this has to be a misunderstanding. They'll check the plates, see it's mine, and everyone will laugh about it later. But that wasn't what happened. Even when the officers confirmed my registration, she refused to back down. She kept shouting about protecting the neighborhood and law and order. Standing there in front of everyone, I felt embarrassed, furious, but also uneasy. It wasn't just the accusation. It was the way the crowd watched, the way no one spoke up. I didn't know it then, but that morning was the spark. The beginning of something far bigger, far uglier. A fight that would uncover secrets buried deep in our so-called perfect community. On the surface, the place had always seemed like a dream. I'd lived there almost 4 years, and most days it felt like the perfect place to raise a family. The streets were calm, lined with neat rows of trees that turned golden in the fall. Lawns were manicured so evenly that it looked like they'd been cut with a ruler. Every evening, kids pedaled their bikes in circles while parents leaned on fences, trading small talk about the weather, school, and weekend plans. My wife and I loved it, that sense of safety, the illusion of unity. It felt like we had found the place where neighbors truly looked out for each other. We had block parties in the summer, Christmas lights twinkling in December, and the occasional barbecue that ended with people laughing until late at night. If you'd asked me back then, I would have said we'd finally found our forever home. But behind that picture-perfect postcard view, there were cracks in the foundation. Cracks I hadn't wanted to notice. Those cracks started small, subtle enough that I brushed them off at first. The same HOA president who once smiled at our barbecue left sharp little notes about our trash cans being visible for too long. A neighbor frowned when my brother parked outside overnight, even though half the street was empty. Once, someone knocked on our door just to complain that my kids' chalk drawings were messy. I laughed it off, telling myself every neighborhood has its quirks. Every group has its rules. I ignored the side glances, the hushed conversations that seemed to pause when I walked by. I told myself it was nothing, but sometimes you don't see the storm coming until it's already overhead. That Saturday morning, when I opened my garage and saw the HOA president waiting, when my quiet weekend plans dissolved into shouting and flashing lights, I realized too late that those warning signs had always been there. It started with that 911 call. Karen, our HOA president, had convinced herself that my car, parked in my garage for years, was stolen property. Even after the police ran the plates and confirmed my registration, she refused to back down. She stood there on my driveway, shouting about community standards and law and order, while neighbors filmed the whole thing. I thought that would be the end of it. An embarrassing misunderstanding, sure, but one we'd all laugh about in a few weeks. I was wrong. Within days, I got my first letter from the HOA, a $150 fine for parking violations. Then another letter, citing me for garage clutter visible from the street, even though my garage door had been closed since the incident. Then a threat, pay up or face a lien on my home. I tried to reason with them, sent emails, attended a meeting, but every attempt to resolve things only seemed to make them angrier. They started showing up with cameras, taking pictures of my yard, my car, even the toys my kids left out by the driveway. The harassment escalated. They cited me for grass that was half an inch too tall, for a garden hose stored improperly, for putting up a small holiday decoration without prior approval. Each letter came with another fine, another threat, another reminder that they had the power to make my life miserable. Neighbors I'd once waved to started avoiding eye contact. Some whispered that I should just pay up and apologize to keep the peace. Others quietly thanked me for standing up to the board, but no one dared say it out loud. Then came the meeting, the one where Karen, yes, her name was Karen, fittingly enough, tried to destroy me in front of everyone. She stood at the front of the room, waving around thick stacks of violation reports, like they were smoking guns. She called me a danger to the community, a repeat offender, a homeowner unwilling to comply. Sitting there, surrounded by my neighbors, my face burning, I realized this wasn't about rules anymore. It was about power. And if I didn't fight back here in this room, they would never stop. That was my breaking point. I started documenting everything. Every letter, every picture, every accusation. I bought a binder and filled it with dates, copies, notes, and photos. I researched state HOA laws until I knew them better than the board did. I spoke with attorneys, filed formal complaints, and demanded answers in writing. And when I started digging deeper, I discovered something they never expected me to find: their corruption. HOA funds weren't just being mismanaged, they were being abused. Residents were charged for landscaping services that never happened, for security upgrades no one had ever seen. And the board? They were paying themselves administrative fees with no receipts. The more I uncovered, the angrier I became. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every neighbor they'd ever bullied into silence. The night of the annual HOA meeting felt like walking into enemy territory. The clubhouse was packed. Residents crammed into every corner, voices low but buzzing with tension. I could see Karen and her loyalists at the front, wearing smug smiles, confident this would be another meeting they controlled. But this time I wasn't walking empty-handed. When the floor opened for community concerns, I stood up. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady as I laid out everything I'd uncovered. The bogus violations, the harassment, the financial discrepancies, the proof of funds siphoned for personal use. At first, there were gasps, then whispers, then outrage. People demanded answers, demanded resignations. Karen tried to shout me down, but the room wasn't on her side anymore. Neighbors who'd stayed quiet for years were suddenly on their feet, angry, emboldened. One even shouted, "We trusted you." And then, the moment I'll never forget, the treasurer, one of Karen's closest allies, stood up and admitted it. The money was gone. The room exploded. Phones were out. People were filming. Someone called the county office right there in the meeting. By the time it ended, the board had no choice but to step down. Every single one of them. As I walked out that night, past stunned neighbors and flashing cameras, I felt the weight of months of fear and frustration finally lift. I hadn't just defended myself. I'd exposed the truth. But even then, I knew the fight wasn't completely over. Because tearing down a corrupt system is one thing. Rebuilding trust? That's something else entirely. When the dust finally settled, the quiet almost felt eerie. For months, every single day had been a battle. Letters in the mailbox, knocks at the door, whispered conversations that died the moment I walked past. I had lived in a constant state of tension, waiting for the next shoe to drop. And then suddenly nothing. No fines. No threats. No Karen lurking at the edge of my driveway like a self-appointed sheriff. At first, that silence was unsettling. I'd wake up in the morning expecting to find another violation notice taped to my door, half expecting to see someone across the street filming me as I mowed the lawn. The peace felt too fragile, almost like an illusion that could shatter at any second. But as the weeks passed, that uneasy silence slowly transformed into something else. Peace. Real peace. I could drink coffee on my porch without scanning the street for trouble. I could mow my lawn without wondering if someone was timing the length of the grass. I could walk my dog at night without feeling eyes on me. It was in those small, ordinary moments that I realized just how much I had lost during the fight, and how much I had finally regained. The strangest part was how empty my mind felt. For so long, every thought had revolved around the HOA. What letter would come next? What rule would they twist against me? What would happen if I didn't pay? And now those thoughts were gone. At first, I didn't know what to do with myself. But slowly, I remembered what life was supposed to feel like. Simple, quiet, normal. And that normalcy was worth more than I could ever explain. Of course, the story didn't just end with peace. The state investigation into the HOA was like ripping a bandage off a wound everyone had been too scared to look at. The new board, elected after the old one resigned in disgrace, began making sweeping changes. They tore out the vague, predatory rules that had allowed Karen and her crew to target whoever they pleased. They set up transparent systems so violations couldn't be fabricated out of thin air. And most importantly, they opened the books. For the first time, every resident could see where the money had gone, and the truth was worse than anyone imagined. Tens of thousands of dollars had disappeared. Landscaping funds? Pocketed. Security upgrades? Never installed. Administrative fees? Paid directly to board members with no receipts. It wasn't just incompetence. It was theft. Plain and simple. The revelation shook the entire neighborhood. People who had once defended the board stood in stunned silence at meetings. Some were angry at the betrayal, others embarrassed they hadn't spoken up sooner. There was outrage, yes, but also relief that the truth was finally out in the open, that they hadn't been imagining the corruption all along. For years, everyone had felt something was off, but no one had dared confront it. Now, with undeniable evidence in front of them, they couldn't look away. The state auditors didn't just stop at financial discrepancies. They began interviewing residents, reviewing past complaints, and piecing together the years of abuse that had been swept under the rug. The result was damning. Civil penalties were issued, restitution demanded, and for the first time in a long time, people felt like justice had been served. But beyond the punishments, what mattered most was the culture shift. Neighbors who had once avoided each other out of fear began reconnecting. Barbecues returned, kids played freely on the sidewalks, and people waved again without that shadow of suspicion. Slowly, For me, though, the greatest victory wasn't in the audits, the fines, or even Karen's humiliation. It was in the little things, the human moments that reminded me why the fight had been worth it. Like Mrs. Thompson, the sweetest older woman on the block, who stopped me one morning with tears in her eyes and said, "You don't know what you've done for us. We were too scared to speak up. You showed us we didn't have to be." Or the young family down the street who told me they were planning to move away because of the constant harassment, but after the reforms decided to stay. Those moments hit harder than any courtroom victory. The impact spread far beyond our subdivision. That viral video of the driveway confrontation kept circulating online, picked up by local news, then regional outlets. Suddenly, my inbox was full of messages from people across the country. Strangers who had their own HOA horror stories. Some were heartbreaking, others were angry, but most of them carried a common thread. They were scared just like we had been, and my story gave them courage. One message in particular stayed with me. A man in Florida wrote, "I was about to sell my house and walk away because my HOA made my life hell. Then I saw your video. I realized I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't alone. I fought back, and I won." Reading that, I realized this wasn't just about me or my neighborhood. It was about something much bigger, a problem affecting countless families across the country. For me, though, the greatest victory wasn't in the audits, the fines, or even Karen's humiliation. It was in the little things, the human moments that reminded me why the fight had been worth it. Like Mrs. Thompson, the sweetest older woman on the block, who stopped me one morning with tears in her eyes and said, "You don't know what you've done for us. We were too scared to speak up. You showed us we didn't have to be." Or the young family down the street who told me they were planning to move away because of the constant harassment, but after the reforms decided to stay. Those moments hit harder than any courtroom victory. The impact spread far beyond our subdivision. That viral video of the driveway confrontation kept circulating online, picked up by local news, then regional outlets. Suddenly, my inbox was full of messages from people across the country. Strangers who had their own HOA horror stories. Some were heartbreaking, others were angry, but most of them carried a common thread. They were scared just like we had been, and my story gave them courage. One message in particular stayed with me. A man in Florida wrote, "I was about to sell my house and walk away because my HOA made my life hell. Then I saw your video. I realized I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't alone. I fought back, and I won." Reading that, I realized this wasn't just about me or my neighborhood. It was about something much bigger, a problem affecting countless families across the country.